Hey, I'm Susanna Lanier, actor and acting coach for over 25 years.
I'm Jess Greenberg, casting director for over 10 years.
We're here to help you navigate this crazy, creative, and sometimes chaotic journey into the film and television world.
We share our insights as to what works.
And invite some pretty spectacular guests to share more ideas to move you on your journey.
So without further ado, let's get into the show.
So today we have Simon Peacock. Born and raised in Christchurch, New Zealand, Simon moved to Canada in 1995 to pursue his dream of being the first Kiwi in the NHL. Horribly undersized, unable to skate, and with no tolerance for the cold, he instead turned to comedy. With a background as an award-winning copywriter, he had been a professional improviser since 1986, during which time he led a New Zealand team to victory at the World Mug in Los Angeles, a Canadian team to the World Improv Championships in 2000, as well as wins in London, Amsterdam, and 5 Just for Laughs championships. He has appeared in numerous films and TV shows, including a regular role on Tales from the Neverending Story, Seriously Weird, Decoys, Big Wolf on Campus, Stardom, and My First Wedding. Not bad for a boy raised in a family of flightless nocturnal birds with a penchant for brown furry fruit. And yes, he does know Bruce from Auckland. He's his cousin. And if you thought this intro sounded different, that's because I did not write it. Welcome, Simon.
You found that buried somewhere in the dark net.
That came from your agent, Reisler Talent. Usually I look at people's bios and then I just kind of grab a couple of things and say it. But I thought it was so well written. I was like, I'm reading the whole damn thing. So did you write it?
I did. It wasn't awkward at all to hear it read back to me.
And as a voice director, I'm sure you would have directed me different, but I just went full energy.
No, I like the energy. It's just, just reads egomaniac. Who wrote that guy? I haven't given up on the NHL dream yet.
Okay.
Just got to learn to skate. It'll be fine.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to chat with you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So yeah, let's start at the beginning. One thing that stuck out to me was like your background in improv, and it's quite impressive. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got started?
Sure. I sort of fell into improv, which is kind of a theme in my entire career, just falling into different things and going, yeah, okay, sure. It was during drama classes at high school, and my high school teachers sort of just had heard about this thing called theatre sports, which actually came out of Calgary in Alberta, which was sort of this way of doing improv in sort of a sports format to try and make it competitive, which essentially was a way of, by scoring scenes, which they would do, you do a little 3-4 minute comedy scene, and then the judges would give you scores like in figure skating. The idea being that if a scene was terrible, it would get terrible scores, and that would then make the audience feel, they were vindicated in their feelings towards the scene, and we could all move on. It's kind of a safety net. Like, that was terrible. We all acknowledge it was terrible.
Yeah.
It got what it deserved. Let's do something different and start afresh. So she heard about this and started doing it with some of her students. And then after a couple of months of doing that in some classes, she sort of took me aside and said, I have some students that finished the school a few years back at Auckland University, and I think we could put the 4 of you together, and there's a competition starting at the theatre here in Christchurch if you're interested. And it's just like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's give it a try. With a group of guys. It was an all-boys school, so they're all boys, sadly. And then that sort of led into this improv experience / adventure going around the place. And we were doing that for a little while. It was like once a week on a Sunday night for a while. And then around 1990, we decided, with the help of a Canadian who moved over, Michael Robinson from Vancouver came over and said, you guys should be doing this professionally and properly. So we spoke with the theatre and set up what is now New Zealand's longest running show, Scared Scriptless in Christchurch, which has been going since 1988. Still running.
Wow. And so you're a founding member of that.
Founding member of that, yeah. One of
creator
of that at one point, and then that led to sort of some international competitions where we went across to various places, like in the intro to LA to the World Mug that was being held there at the same time as the Soccer World Cup. I think it was like 24 teams from around the world. Sort of exposed us all. We were a young little New Zealand team, exposed us all to the bigger world of improv and the different ways of doing it. And we were sort of the young, really hyperactive people that made us splash. We weren't jaded and cynical like the North Americans yet.
Right.
weren't weirdly surreal like some of the European teams. So we did really well there, and then that led to me getting invited to another tournament, which was in Victoria, BC, like 3-4 months later, where I ended up meeting my wife, Jennifer Say again, and that then led to me moving to Montreal, where I started working with On the Spot at the Comedy Works downtown. And so that was sort of 8 shows a week for years and years, and just really, really fine-tuning it, and just a really different form of improv.
Wow.
A comedy club audience is different than a theater audience. So I had to learn pretty quickly to adapt to a very different audience environment.
Yeah,
it was fun. It was just such a perfect little situation of a great venue for improv, and a really, really good group of people together.
Are the other members of that group, the initial group, in Montreal, or like, do you still keep in touch with them?
Yeah, most of them are still here. There's a couple that have moved to other places, like probably the best known would be John Wall, radio host, works with a big time radio station in Toronto. Colin Ferguson was with us early on. He's moved to LA, is acting in LA a lot. Most of the others are still here in Montreal. Yeah, we stay in touch.
Cool. You're going to do a reunion?
I think we did one a while back. I think we're reaching the age where nobody would know who the hell we were anyway.
I would. You'd have some of us old timers show up. Woo!
We'll come around to your place and do it privately.
In our backyard. We'll do a barbecue.
Barbecue reunion show.
Cool. So you were doing the improv, and then you went into voice right away, or that was just sort of part of it? How did you fall into the voice world?
The voice happened a few years in, and it was before I was a union member too, so it was hard to get that work. But there was a weird coincidental moment of a show called The Wombles, which was a British show in the 1970s that I grew up watching as a kid. Mm-hmm. And they decided to do a reboot of it as a co-production between Canada and England. Okay. And weirdly, they decided, it's a very, very English show, but weirdly, they decided we should do the voice work in Canada. Specifically in Montreal, and everything in England, but it has to be the most British sounding show possible. They'd been auditioning for a while, and the English producers didn't like the accents that they were getting. It didn't sound real. Yeah. Everybody thinks they can do RP and Cockney, right? Whether or not they can, it's a different story, but everybody thinks they can do both of those, and that those are the only accents that exist in the UK. Right. So there was some frustration for the casting, so they opened it up to people outside of the union, and I went in and was lucky enough to book that. That was in the CNAR days. And that was, 3 or 4 seasons of sort of 20-something episodes, all original voice. And then once you got into CNAR, they at the time were just this hub of so much animation work that then opened up lots and lots of other possibilities. So then there were lots and lots of other shows that sort of started falling into that.
Right. So, and how are you with accents?
I'm pretty good with the UK accents in particular.
Okay.
Sort of UK and some of the Commonwealth, like Australia and New Zealand, obviously.
Yeah, New Zealand, you got that down. It's very realistic.
Very good.
The regional accents as well, and places like South Africa and those sorts of accents I can do pretty easily because, New Zealand, most of our culture is, certainly when I was growing up, came from the UK as opposed to Canada, where most of the culture was coming from south of the border. It's that more American thing. So, Canadians can do all those regional US accents. I struggle with those way more. Okay. But I have a much better ear for like regional UK, which has been an asset to me here because there's not a lot of people that do that here.
Do it properly, right? And then then from animation, you moved into video games, or that was just sort of all part of it?
Yeah, it was kind of part of it at the time. Like Ubisoft were the first sort of company to start doing video games in Montreal, and I booked a couple of gigs in there. I think first one would have been Splinter Cell, which was an Irish accent. There you go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That's all I got going for me. Is it sounds weird.
Well, it worked for voice. That's we'll talk more about that because you are a voice actor and director, and so
so that got me into video games. But at the time, that was just a little sort of one-off extra gig, and there were the occasional little pieces there because it really wasn't a big thing when it first started happening here. And I don't think anybody in Montreal had any concept of what it was going to become.
Right.
And then it sort of coincided. We're all very fortunate in the voice world in Montreal that as CNAR died off, because as I'm sure many Montrealers know, they got caught up in a massive fraud case. Yeah. They were getting government grants and those sorts of things and funding. So it collapsed, and it took the entire Montreal animation industry with it, like other companies as well, couldn't get funding anymore. And so that whole industry just within a year was gone.
Right.
And that kind of hit about the same time as Ubisoft really started growing.
Right.
And then some other companies started coming to Montreal as well for the same tax credits that Ubisoft had. So from the political point of view, if you're an actor in Montreal, if you ever speak to an M&A, make sure to talk to them about tax credits and how great they are and how we need more of them.
Okay.
That's how we-
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Tax credits. That's what we should be
on
doing.
a tangent, on a political tangent here.
Yes.
You know,
go
Montreal
ahead.
is losing out on film and TV work at the moment because we have the worst tax credits in Canada. We
Oh
used to
my.
get ones. For example, there was a film last year that was set in Montreal, shot in Winnipeg, purely because of the tax credits they had here. So if you ever talk to a member of the National Assembly, let them know about that and let them know that those tax credits are costing us our livelihood.
Very good to know.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah, that's interesting.
We're falling behind. Yeah, our tax credits in Quebec haven't been touched in decades, basically, whereas the rest of Canada has caught up and then surpassed it. So,
Wow.
That whole thing with the voice work going down and the film and television going down, we're seeing how quiet it is this year. So do you know why that is? Like, what is your what do you think that's happening?
a lot of it's cyclical. The video game world in particular, it's been a little bit quiet here, but some of that is because the bigger companies in Montreal outside of Ubisoft have just released their big games, like Gotham
Okay.
Knights from D and Guardians of the Galaxy from Eidos were just released last year. So now they're sort of back into the pre-production cycle again, and they'll start building. Ubisoft is pretty consistent. They're such a big studio; they always have stuff on the go, so that's pretty good. Film and TV work, you know, we took a hit because of just the mention of Bill 96, which was going to
Okay.
make every producer in the city was going to have to do all of their pre-production work entirely en français, which you can imagine LA companies look at that and go, no, we're not going to do that. Especially not in a globalized, you know, it's a globalized industry. They can go anywhere they want. And so
Yeah.
for all of last summer they did, and that was without Bill 96 even being passed. I mean, we fought really hard and got that changed so that there are exemptions, but it has had a lasting impact. Then the tax credits, and then there's also rumors of a writer's strike very shortly, and making a lot of studios just sort of put a halt on production until they see what's going to happen there. Like pitching's basically being stopped in LA the last couple of months. So new productions are just sort of all on hold to see whether or not there's a strike.
Okay. And what do you think we should do about it as our industry, Actors in Montreal?
Actors in Montreal, I mean, same as we've always done, which is make our own work and find other avenues of getting that work. You know, like video games we hadn't thought about at all in the past. One of the great things that's happening in Montreal at the moment, which is a revival, is dubbing.
Yeah.
Dubbing had pretty much died in Montreal, just because the technology used to be sort of exclusively here in Montreal because of all the French television and film that was then dubbed into French. And we'd just use it on the side for English productions, and it became, you know, a staple for a lot of performers, especially voice actors, making their livings. And then it just kind of dropped off when digital technology came along, so anybody could dub anywhere in the world. But now we've been, you know, at ACTRA, we work with Netflix a lot in particular, and talking to them about the skills we have. We have so many experienced dubbers here, which nowhere else in the world can match us for the depth of experience and knowledge we have in dubbing.
Oh,
And
that's
so
amazing. Yay, us.
there's
Woohoo.
more and more stuff here. Yeah, I was looking at the stats the other day at ACTRA, and I think we've quadrupled the number of actors that have worked in dubbing in the last year.
Oh
And
my
the
God.
income has gone up by sort of 9 or 10-fold. So it's growing substantially again. Because, you know, it's great for, you know, it's not just Netflix too. It's all those streaming services, Prime and Hulu.
Yeah.
And, you know, they all need content, and a really quick and easy way of getting content is to take foreign productions and dub them. And dubbing, the other reason why dubbing is revived is because now nobody watches TV just to watch TV. We all have another screen while we're doing it, right? We're watching TV and we're typing, so subtitles we can't follow. So that's why dubbing is really seeing its second wind coming in now.
Yeah. Well, I'm
And-
excited about that. I'm happy about that because it feels like there's a lull in the city. So to say, yeah, but like anything, the animation went down, video games came up. You know, now we're having a little bit of a halt, but dubbing's coming up. So just to remind us.
Commercial has been down as well because of the lockout. You know, here in Quebec, we signed an extra deal with the A2C, which has meant we've kept most of our work, but it's still down a bit from what it was. You know, there's still some resistance there. So yeah, it's been a tough little while, but as anybody who's been in the industry for very long is going to tell you, this is what happens. You know, we all have, you know, it's feast or famine. It's always the case. And if we all had the magic button we could push that would just make it consistent, we would, but that's just not the nature of the industry. So it's, you know, when you have those great months, put that money aside.
And enjoy it. Enjoy the work and have fun. And it's the same as life. like sometimes you're aligned and things are clicking, everything. And then sometimes all kind of went to hell and the pipe goes and you owe $15,000 and, like stuff happens. It's just part of life. And I think acting, it feels more so because it's, for a lot of us, a real passion. But the one thing, and I think living in Montreal, and you'll tell me if you agree, it's different than maybe in some other places. It doesn't build. It's the biggest complaint. You feel like you're building a career and then it like stops, but it's kind of not like that. It's more like ups and downs.
Yeah. Cause it is a small community here relative to, especially to Toronto or Vancouver, which means we don't have the consistency of big projects here,
right?
Which means I think we do get some deeper lulls than elsewhere, but per capita, ACTRA members in Montreal actually do really well on a national basis because of us here. We don't need the same volume of work to make a living. But yeah, and I love the Montreal community because it is exactly that. When in Montreal, you walk into a waiting room for an audition and be like, oh, hey, it's almost a party atmosphere. We're all having fun and great to see everybody. And then it's like, hey, did you go in for that other role? Because you should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's totally, we have each other's back. We support each other. We're trying to find work for one another. It's not, I think that's where the size helps. We're small enough that you can't get away with that kind of shitty behavior. Word will get out.
And we don't, it's not in our energy, and it's like I said, it's positive and negative because we also sometimes are lacking a little bit of that chutzpah to like get out there and we're kind of all together in it, like, oh, there's nothing, it'll go to Toronto, and then that's it. And you're like, well, no, you have some agency, you could step
and I
up
think
a little.
we're seeing that change as well. I think that's actually been the great thing with the self-tape generation that we're in now, is we can submit our tapes anywhere. We're in the same playing field. That it has leveled the playing field to a large extent. We're not reliant on somebody else getting us to be seen by producers across Canada or even producers in Montreal, because I know that's often a complaint that Montreal people have, that we're not getting seen for those roles. Now it's with self-tape, you've got the chance to get access to that.
Yeah.
Now it's up to us to do great self-tapes and book that work. We can complain about it forever, but eventually, we got to put up with
get on the bandwagon and just do great work, which I think we do. I feel our talent does, but like you say, we're just smaller. We don't have as many members.
Yeah, and the talent here is fantastic. Like I've been fortunate enough to work on video games now for a long time and be directing them, and I've gone all over the world to do that. Work with huge names and all that kind of stuff all around the world, but there's nowhere that has better talent in the video game world in particular than Montreal. It's just the only difference between Montreal and LA when it comes to talent is we'll have 5 or 6 people that are good for a role and they'll have 40.
Right.
But the 5 or 6 we have here are just as good as the absolute top that are in LA. Just as good.
Yeah. And that
often better because they're people.
Right. Because they're nice people. Exactly. But that's a consistent thing that we find in this podcast. It's from casting directors like Jess, but when we have Rosine on, everybody's good. It's just less people. So it's quality is quality, and we have it. And I remember, I've shared this story before, but going to LA to audit a acting class thinking I'm going to be like blown away. And I was like, no, there was some exceptions, like in my acting class here. And then there was some like, that was just, there was no difference in terms of, you look at 20 students in Montreal, 20 students in LA, there was no difference. There was some standouts and some mediocre and some,
it's a numbers game. And that numbers game, I think, is traditionally one of the reasons why we have had a harder time getting Montrealers into those bigger roles. Because if you're a producer and you're looking to, I've got a lead role and I need to book someone in it, I want lots of options for that, right? And I'm going to get a lot more options if I cast it out of LA or I cast it out of Vancouver or out of Toronto. And unfortunately, the way that process has been set up traditionally is they'll look there first, which means but it's based on that numbers game. But then it means that Montreal members who are just as good didn't get a chance to audition for those. I think that's always been a frustration here.
Simon, are you still acting? I wanted to ask you about acting. Are you still auditioning and acting, or are you focused more on voice and directing?
It's hard to do both. Honestly, the voice directing has become pretty intense, and when you get a gig, it's it can be anything from a week to a year, 2-3 years work on something like Gotham Knights. In which case, it's it's hard to take. I have a hard time taking an audition in good conscience if I know that I'm unlikely to be available if it shoots. if I'm lucky enough to get it.
What was the transition like from actor to director? Was there a book the room style story?
It was it's kind of like my improv career. I just sort of fell into it again. I'd done some voice work, and then I was talking with one of the directors, Arthur Holden, who I'm sure a lot of you viewers / listeners will know. Arthur Holden, a man who's helped so many people in this community. He was directing video games with Ubisoft at the time, and they'd been giving feedback. They had a few people directing at that point who all came from that animation world. So Ubisoft was feeling that a lot of the voice performances they were getting were just a little too cartoony for where they were heading with their video games. So they wanted to sort of find some new directors with a different mindset. And Arthur was kind enough to tell them that I had been a gamer, that I enjoyed playing video games and knew that world. And so they were, you know, being a new company without much experience themselves, they were just like, okay, let's interview him. Come on in and have an interview. So I went in and interviewed, I think it was probably about 12 people around a boardroom table chatting to me about, you know, what's your favorite games? What's your directing process? And entirely bluff my way through, never having directed a game before. It went pretty well. It was at that stage, it was about Assassin's Creed was the game that we were just coming out with, and that was what I was interviewing for. And sort of a week later, I got the message that they didn't think I should be doing Assassin's Creed yet because I didn't have the experience, but they would have me start on Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones in like a week's time. Here's the script, cast it, and let's go.
Curious, as the director, were you involved in the casting process, or you're really just directing in studio for those characters?
Yeah, but when I first started, Ubisoft didn't have the Alice department, which is where they do all their casting internally now. That didn't exist. They just had somebody doing the paperwork, basically, and doing all the sort of office stuff behind it. So if you were the voice director on a project at Ubisoft, casting was pretty much your responsibility as well.
Wow.
So I walked into my first gig, had to cast straight away. It was just like, okay, cool. But I had the advantage, you know, at that stage, I was doing quite a bit of film and TV as well. So I met a lot of people in those worlds that weren't doing voice work. Mm-hmm. So I thought, yeah, they could totally do this. I'm going to bring people in that aren't voice actors and see what happens. And a lot of them booked it pretty much straight away. A couple of roles that were cast out of LA, which was fine as well, because at that point, you know, there was an industry in LA. At that point, there wasn't in Montreal. So for a lead, they wanted somebody with experience back then. Not so much the case anymore. But then they did, and it was just thrown into it. So you're going to cast it. It was back in the day of in-person castings. There was no self-tapes then really at all. So it was, you know, you book a studio for a couple of days and everybody comes in, they get 10 minutes, read the role, and then we'll take all those tapes back and sit in a boardroom with the writers and producers and give them my feedback on each of those performers and chat through it. You know, same as still pretty much true for the process nowadays. It's just, you know, talk about it, see who they like, try and give them my feedback on somebody if I've worked with them before. That's more the case nowadays. It's like, have you ever worked with this person? Do they work well with direction? Reassuring people that yeah, and
also just important to highlight that, like, you know, when you're talking about the performances, like at a certain level, everyone you're bringing forward is great, and then it comes down to, can they take direction? Do they have range? Do you like working with them? Like those are all just as important as the actual talent itself, and some people don't realize that, or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
That.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so important when, you know, and it's interesting to be in that position where you're going to be directing it as well, and you're the casting director, because then you really get the hands-on straight away of whether or not this is a relationship that's going to work.
Yeah.
Right. There's no telling me what they were like when they came in or anything like that. It's like, I'm there the whole time chatting with you. Yeah. It's always been fascinating to me that the attitude some people bring into auditions is really interesting. It's just like, really? You're coming in, you know, for video games in particular, some people don't like video games, and they're not shy about telling you that when they come in for the audition, which is really strange.
Not how to book the room.
That's not how to book the room.
Yeah. Like other thing, like when you've done your audition, get out. I could tell all my students this as well. Like, don't hang around. Nothing good comes from hanging around after an audition. Like if the audition's done well, great. Leave that as the final impression. If the audition's gone badly, explaining it's not going to help.
Yeah.
No.
There's one example I like to give people. I had a woman come in and audition for me. She did a great audition. The clients were there with me in the room. They loved her, thought she was fantastic. She walked out of the room and went, "Oh, that was awful. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I was out really late last night. I just don't know. I'm so sorry." And by the time she left that part of the studio, she was unhired. right? Because they were like, well, then she didn't know what she was doing, so she can't replicate it. And she didn't have enough respect for the process that she, had an early night and was ready to go. She was hungover.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Just get out.
Just
Get out. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
For me, the most important thing and the most successful thing I've seen in the room is just people that are actually having fun, especially for video games, because they are fun to do and they should be fun to do. And actors come in so nervous for auditions, which I totally get, having been on that side, but also now having been on the other side, it's changed the way I audition, because it's just like, there's no point in being upset and stressed, because it's not going to go well. It's not going to be the way the character should be, unless it's an upset, stressed character, but that's pretty rare. But if you're enjoying it, I mean, we're all actors. We want to be acting. We want an audience. Well, that's what the audition room is. Right. You get to perform and you do have an audience. So embrace it as, oh my God, I got a chance to act. This is going to be fun. This is great. And especially that first take, come in with some really strong, interesting choices and go for it. If it's too big, then, people like Jess or myself are going to pull you back and redirect you. But just come in with a really good attitude and enjoy the process, because everybody, that's the other thing I like to tell people, everybody in the room when you audition wants you to get it.
Yes.
Everybody, because then we've done our job, right? Like as a casting director, if I've suggested you come in for it, it makes me look great if you come in and nail it. And we don't have to go to a second round of auditions of like, okay, these aren't the people I would have brought in first round, but let's see if we can find someone. That makes me look slightly less like I know what I'm doing. But if I can get those roles cast by people coming in the first call, I look great. So of course I want you to succeed. The reader wants you to succeed so they can stop reading that same role over and over and over.
And it's exciting. It's exciting to see you. It really, enthusiasm does vibrate to other people. Like when you feel excited and you're doing a good job, everybody feels that energy.
Yeah. And if it comes down to a close call between two people and we can't really pick which one we're going to go with, it's going to be the one that was more fun to work with.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're going to be spending a very long time with you in a small studio.
Yeah.
We don't want the person that was just, the diva. If they're getting the same result as the person that was fun to work with, it's going to be the person that's fun to work with every time.
Yeah. Right. And with video games too, I find often it happens that, roles can be written for like larger. And so if you come with that good attitude, it could very well happen that it's like, we like working with this person. We want to give them more. And
yeah, absolutely. I've seen that happen a lot, because video games aren't the end process, aren't at the end of their process when they come to the audition part of it. Sometimes we're still early, like the game itself, there's still thousands of pages to be written, right? So roles can evolve and change, and if they find someone that comes in with something that really sparks them, it's just like, oh, this is great. The classic Montreal story that I'm sure everybody's aware of now is Michael Mando, right? He got to be in Far Cry. He'd been trying to audition for that role. The role was supposed to be some huge, buff, classic villain, just some big thug. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't see him for it. But they couldn't find anybody that was doing anything different for that role. They auditioned and auditioned and auditioned. And then eventually, Michael's agent finally got them to relent and say, oh, fine, we'll see him. And he went in and played it completely different to anything they'd thought of. They then showed the tapes to the writers. The writers were like, we love this. Completely rewrote the character. Ended up, not just rewrote the character, but changed the way the character looked. It's basically, Michael's physique, and it's Michael Mando on the cover of the game. Completely changed it. And I mean, that doesn't always happen for those huge roles, but it happens quite a lot in smaller roles. And I think another thing that's different in the video game world of auditions is just because you're auditioning for one role really doesn't mean that's the only role we're looking at you for.
Yeah.
Because often there's hundreds and hundreds of roles and we don't have all of them written yet, or there's just no way we're going to do specific auditions for that many individual roles. So we'll just, here's 5 or 6 scripts. Everyone's going to audition with those scripts, and then we'll cast everything based on their performances for that. So I think it's important that for a performer, they know that, because it sometimes is like, this role isn't really a great fit for me. Mm-hmm. I don't see why I'm going in for this. It's like, okay, then bring you to that role and change it up and make it fit for you so that you're doing your best performance. If it's wrong for the role, if that's the only role we're looking at you for, then you haven't really lost anything if you weren't right for it anyway. But you've given us a good audition. We're going to go, that person's really good. We're going to bring you back. Or if we're looking for everything else, because, video games, there's thousands of characters in the background, right? Well, there's people just wandering the streets. We don't audition for those generally. We just take them from people that have come in for other roles. Yeah. So if you're good, you're fun to work with, you do a good performance and got a good voice, it's going to be like, okay, we're putting them on the list. They're going to be great for, all of our background roles, which often pay more because you have a lot more work to do.
That's what I wanted to ask. In animation, often you'll go in for like a few roles because they like to cast one actor in 2 or 3 roles. Is it the same for video games? Do they try to get different, or is it really each person individually per role?
No, it depends on the game and the company.
Okay.
If it's a huge budget game, they'll try and get more actors into the cast. They can afford to do that. But even then, just because of the sheer numbers, unless you're one of the leads, it's very rare that you won't be playing a couple of other characters as well.
Right. So second question, how important is diversity in terms of different accents, different like vocal range in the video game world?
Yeah, vocal range is good, but there's a lot of technicalities behind as to whether or not we actually change your voice from character to character. Oftentimes now you'll have the same voice for every character, just because the volume of lines you have to read. Like if you're coming in and you're playing, let's say you're going to play the fishmonger, the blacksmith, a guard, and a cobbler. Yeah. We may keep the same voice for all 4 of those roles because they all have to have the same set of what's called barks and no-nos, which are the interactive lines. So if the player bumps into you, they all have to react to that. It's, oh, or hey, which way you going? Look out, all those kind of lines. Yeah. So if we change the voice for each one of those characters, then we have to record those lines, every single character voice. So we've quadrupled the amount of work we have to do, which means we're paying a lot more, which means we're taking more time in studio, and most importantly means we're taking more of the memory capacity of the game itself. Okay. So generally in those roles, we'll keep somebody with the same voice for all 4 of those characters, so they can all use the exact same barks and the same screams. So sometimes one voice is changing the attitude. Other times, depending on the characters, if those characters are already self-contained within the world of the game, then we know not much can happen to them. So we don't need to record thousands and thousands of barks. It's like we just need, say, 10, 15 reactions for this character. Then we'll go a little crazy with the voice. And that's where having that range of voices is really important. On the dialects, less and less important in some ways. There's really been a change in the way people are casting for accents now, which is trying to be a lot more authentic about it, which is great. Those cartoon accents of yesteryear just do not cut it in video games anymore. It's just sounds wrong. And also the complication with dialects, I say this to a lot of people when I see their resumes, is in video games, you're often going to have to cold read with that. You're not going to see a script in advance. So your dialect has to be rock solid. You're not going to have time to go home and, put your annotations on your script and make your notes and figure out what this should sound like and listen back to it and maybe go to a vocal coach. You're not going to have the luxury of doing that for most of these games. You're going to walk into the studio, we're going to give you the script, and we're going to say rolling. And your accent has to be locked in. So you really, really need to have solid accents. Don't just think, oh, yeah, I can do that. I can. Can you do it when we say rolling without, a week with the script working on it? I can't, for sure. Yeah. That's an accent I would just turn down straight away. Like, no, thanks. Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
Got to be honest about that, because that's how you can do damage to your career too, right? Saying you can do something that you can't. That's the kind of thing that can injure your reputation.
I know my students are rethinking a lot of, because they would same thing. I can do, Southern New York, Scottish, like forget some Dutch. The
list of accents is ridiculous. Like, there's no way in hell. I have friends who direct as well, and one of their hobbies is any time someone auditions, it's just calling them on any accent they see on the resume. So, can you do that can you do your Scottish accent? I just watch them.
Humble.
Yeah, so that's good to know. So you're saying it's not as important anymore. Not important, but having this huge diverse range it's not necessarily the most important thing if you want a career in video games, or let's say not a career, but work in video games. What is the most important thing then if you are hoping to work in video games?
A lot of it is just understanding the genre and the medium. Okay. Like sometimes I'm astounded when people come in to audition for a game and they haven't thought about it at all. And it's like, you have to treat it with the same respect as you would a TV or film audition. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you're going in for a film audition, who's directing it. You're probably going to watch some of their work before you go in. If you're going in for a TV show, you're going to watch some episodes of that TV show so you know what you're doing. And it should be the same when you go in for a video game. Like, there are some really big, obvious companies here in Montreal that you will know you're auditioning for them. So watch the games. You don't have to play them. Every video game ever made is on YouTube.
Yes.
And it's entirely. So you can just watch it on YouTube and get a sense of it, because all the companies here have their own distinct style. So you need to be aware of that before you go into the room. And then you're halfway there, right? Like, casting's a lottery. And if you can get a couple of numbers in advance, then do that. And that's what doing your research does.
Okay. So it's sort of having a sensitivity to the tone of the game. If you feel you can align yourself with the tone of the game, that's more important than knowing how to do a Scottish and a New Zealand accent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, the Scottish
Okay.
and New Zealand accents, those are
It's
great.
not going to hurt you.
No, those are good assets to have, and because sometimes we will be looking specifically for that, but
Yeah.
not as often as we're looking for a standard North American accent.
Okay.
It's still the one we get the most. And the games that we're doing in Montreal increasingly are moving towards naturalism in their performance style.
Are you hiring now people, that's what I understood, who have authentic accents? You'd like people who have, like, I'm going to hire somebody who's actually Russian to play this role.
Absolutely. That's absolutely 100% the trend. And I think video games jumped on that a lot quicker than film and TV did, and have been a lot more aggressive in pursuing that. Like a company like Ubisoft, they will cast globally for those roles now. They're not just going to say, oh, we didn't find that specific accent in Montreal, so we're just going to give up, and we'll get some white performer come in and do that accent, which has happened in the past, right? Nowadays, they will search the globe to find the right accents. And sometimes they create accents in their ancient worlds, like some of those Assassins games. Nobody knows what people sounded like back then, but they do incredible research, working with linguists and historians and all these various people to sort of come together and figure out what it probably would have sounded like what are the regional influences that exist today that would have grown from that dialect, and then we'll sort of create this sort of master template of how it sounds, and then have dialect coaches come in and coach in advance all of our performers in the cast to make sure they all sound consistent with that. So that's how seriously they're taking it, right? That's a huge undertaking. It's a massive amount of work and expense to try and get those sorts of things right.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what they're pros at, is creating these worlds. And part of that is the language and accent. So yeah, I don't expect anything less, really.
I mean, honestly,
no, but it's beautiful. It's amazing. Like that's They
raised the bar and all that sort of stuff, and it's fascinating to see. Like, then they're doing offshoots of some of those Assassins games that are being used as teaching tools. Here's a tour of ancient Egypt. Here's a tour of ancient Greece. That's all being virtually recreated. I mean, when the Basilica of Notre Dame burnt down, Ubisoft was one of the first companies that was approached about it, because they had a perfect 3D map of it for when they did Assassin's Creed Unity.
Wow!
So they had more detailed information about the actual cathedral than the people that were working there.
Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences between like the different kinds of voice works, because we talk a lot about like diversifying here in Montreal to live as an actor. If that is one's goal, like you have to diversify. So even like bringing up dubbing, like that is a whole other skill in itself. Like that is totally different from video games to commercial to animation. So like, are there any like key things that stick out to you, like about the differences between all of them?
Yeah, dubbing is I would say the most technical of them. Learning how to use the rhythm band and the little symbols that are used in that takes a bit of time, and really the only way to figure it out is to do it.
Okay.
And actually, we're starting to do a lot more workshops for that, because it's one of, as I was saying, there's a lot more work coming. So we've made that undertaking with some of the studios here and with Netflix, that we will make sure that we are training more and more people, so that it's not, because their concern is that the talent pool's not huge, so they don't want to hear the same voices on every show that gets dubbed here. So we've sort of taken it upon ourselves. Okay, we will make sure that ACTRA members are getting that training. So there's going to be a lot more workshops in that area coming up. People can keep their eye out for that, because
that's fantastic.
That's
I've applied,
amazing.
but it was for diversity. They really started through ACTRA. They'll start broadening it.
No, we are. We're going to be broadening it out to all the membership as well. It started with BIPOC performers in particular, because that's where we had the least number of experienced performers, because traditionally, the opportunities just hadn't been there, for a lot of reasons that I won't go into now. But that's been redressed, which is great. And that's why we started there, because that's the community that needs that work the most, because they haven't had those opportunities. So we want to make sure that they get a head start, and because those roles now exist that didn't 20 years ago, right? Yeah. We're now seeing more diverse people on screen, which back when we started dubbing, very few of them were being given to BIPOC performers. So now we have that opportunity. So we're going to make sure we do that right. But we are going to be offering the workshop up to everybody as we move forward, because we need lots and lots of people with that skills.
That's exciting.
It is. It's
That's
good news.
Exciting, because I've tried that Rhythmo band, and it's hard. I only get it really for ADR, and I was like, I would love to take a workshop, because I'd love to be able to, whether I get work or not, just be able to do it. I feel like it
just magically clicks one day when you're watching that. It's also good if you can contact dubbing directors and see if they'll let you sit in and audit these things. That's changing. We couldn't, obviously, during COVID, have extra people studios, but that's starting to change, and studios are starting to realize that if they want new performers, they're going to have to open that up again. So that's another possibility that's out there. So yeah, that's dubbing. Dubbing's the most technical for that reason, but magically one day it just clicks. You'll be watching the band and suddenly it's just, oh, I get it now. Cool. Now I can dub. And then it's about then putting your performance on top of all that technicality. Dubbing, you don't get it in advance. You're going to see it once, maybe twice before you actually try doing it. Line by, a couple of lines at a time. Usually it's blocks, little blocks of a scene that might be cut up. You might get 3 or 4 lines in there, might be just one line, but you're going to see it once or twice. Then you're going to have to do it, reading it as it goes by, like karaoke. Commercials, you don't see that in advance.
Nope.
You arrive, you just do that straight away. Video games, if you've got a lead role, nowadays you probably will see it in advance. Motion capture you will, because you have to learn it. But for voice work, probably now 60% of the time you will see it in advance. But 40% of the time it's absolute cold read, and it's going to be hundreds of lines within that couple of hours that you're there. So yeah, if you want to be a voice actor, cold reading is absolutely essential.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You could finish.
I just wanted to say that's the first thing. Look at your cold read skills.
Yeah.
Practice that. So that's number one. Quality of voice. Would you say that's what I wanted to know? Does it matter? And okay, my personal opinion, it doesn't, because if you say, oh, I think I have a weird voice, that could be to your benefit. Maybe not for like commercials if they're looking for that standard, selling product. But if you have a kind of quirky voice, it might be good. It certainly could be good for different characters.
I certainly don't have a radio announcer voice at all. So when I do commercials, it's always characters.
Right.
For me, it's about any voice can get voice work. It's just a matter of knowing your own voice and identifying the roles that you could possibly get. Because that's how you can build a really solid demo as well, right? Like when I listen to a demo and I hear hearing someone jumping around all over the place, it's just like, do you have any idea who you are as an actor? It's like, it gets frustrating. Whereas if I hear a really good demo, it's generally someone that's figured out who they are, what their voice works for, and that's all that they're giving me in their demo.
Excellent.
Not trying to show that I can do every voice in the world. There's a couple of freaks that can do that, but most people can't.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to put, I can't do a lead voice in a video game. I'm not that deep gruff guy. I can't do this for 4 hours at a time.
Right.
But so that's not on my demo, because that's going to get me into trouble. I'm going to show up and say, hey, can you do that voice for 5 minutes, maybe? And without any emotional range, sure. But I can do the quirky sidekicks. I can do the science geeks. I can do, the scared hostage, that kind of stuff. Sure. So that's what's going to be on my demo, right? And some of those dialects that I can cold read on, they'll be in there. But demos are tricky because that's something that's changed massively too. The digital age, like back in the day, we all used to make our cassettes, and spend hundreds of dollars getting cassettes copied and printed and sent out, and then CDs. Back then, one demo was all you needed for voice, and you sort of covered everything in that one demo. But nowadays, with MP3s and MP4s and tech, you should have a separate demo for each of the main voice areas. So narration, commercial, animation, and video game should be 4 separate demos. And they have different requirements. Like commercial and animation expect something really polished, just because of the way those industries work and how established they are. So if you're going to spend money, those are the ones to spend money on. Video games, way more accessible. They just want to hear your voice and hear that you can act. So I tell students studying video games, you can do it on your phone. That's all you've got.
Yeah.
Most people these days have a laptop and a microphone and some sort of editing software, so they can do something decent. And again, so long as I can hear your voice, I can hear you can act, it's all I need. I don't need sound effects. I don't need music. I'm not going to hire you as a producer, so don't worry about that stuff. I don't need you to write really clever scripts because I'm not going to hire you as a writer.
Right.
So you can just transcribe stuff off of games that exist already. You can write your own scenes. Don't care what it is. Don't spend your whole demo just setting up a joke.
Right.
Because I'll have already skipped to somebody else's demo by then. Oh, that's the only voice they do.
Right.
Some demos go on forever. And it's just like, I've heard the voice, 10, 15 seconds of a voice. Any experienced director is going to know what that voice is and whether or not it works for them, right? So then give them something different. What's next? Give them a different emotional state. If you feel like, this is my voice, I just have the one voice, I don't have range, then give me different emotional states and different situations so that I can hear that you can act and perform, right? Different energy.
That's a very good tip, I think, because I think that's a very good tip. Different emotional range, and do your acting work at that point. different tones, you know,
and
as
that's
opposed
all
to
we're listening to a demo for, right? Is to hear the quality of the voice and to hear if you can act.
okay.
So if your demo achieves both of those things, and if it's only 30 seconds long, but it shows that, great. It doesn't have to be 2 minutes long to get a point across. And it's increasingly important for video games because more and more we're getting games that are just casting straight from demos. They don't want to spend the money or the time on casting at all. So they'll approach somebody like me and say, here are the roles, send us 3 demos for each role.
Wow.
Right. So if you don't have a demo, you don't have a shot at it.
Okay. That's good to know.
You answered the question of if people want to get into voice acting. So demo is number one.
The video games, the demo is your business card, right? And it's also something that you can update from time to time as well. And that gives you a legitimate reason to reach out to people in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if nothing's happened, you've had a demo out there for 6 months and you haven't had a single call, then the demo's not working.
Yeah.
Make a new demo and make that your reason for reaching out to casting people, saying, hey, I've got a new demo, just wanted to see if I could send it to you. Right. As opposed to being one of those people that sends an email every week saying, hey, what's going on? You haven't cast me anything. What's happening? Hey, I'm still out here. You still haven't cast me anything. Why is that? What the hell's going on? I said, let me go. I'm outside your house now. Where's my role?
Yeah, no, we don't want that.
Well, thank you so much, Simon. This was amazing. We love talking to you. You gave us so much information, and I'm going to go get that demo. You've inspired me, and I'm feeling positive about being Montreal, about being in Montreal. And thank you.
You are Montreal, Susanna.
Yes. Amazing. And I'm going to look out for those workshops on dubbing because I'm really wanting to take one. So you guys get it going. I'm excited. Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So for today's takeaways, 1, go in and have fun. Directors will book people they get along with. 2, get yourself a good voice demo. More and more directors are casting direct off demo. 3, lulls are cyclical, but you can still go and bug your MPs to get more tax credits and bring the productions back to Montreal. And 4, if voice work is a goal for you, keep working on your cold reading because that's a key skill to have in the voice world. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. If you're enjoying this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to support us.
Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. You can share this podcast with your friends and colleagues and follow us on social media at Book the Room Podcast.
We put out episodes weekly, so subscribe to the shows to get notifications.